Hi. For my active learning, I decided to do the review on an episode from Undertaking the podcast. Before I dive into it, I do want to say that I used to listen to Undertaking the podcast for like 8 hours a day. This was back in 2020 when I was working for Aldi. I had just recently decided I was going to go to mortuary school, so I was reading everything I could find on mortuary science, funeral directing, funerals, listening to podcasts. So I listened to Undertaking the podcast. I listened to this British embalming podcast, and I want to say I'm missing a couple. The Funeral Boss Inc. one that has a couple episodes out there. Regardless, there was at one point where I had caught up to episode, I think it was like 236. And at that point, I had went back and wanted to re-listen to ones that like really stuck out to me. So honestly, the two episodes that still to me, like I go back and revisit is yours, episode 20, and then episode 174 with Anna Marie Foster. I'm going to talk about her podcast just because you already know what you said. But I will mention that the two things that stuck from me, or with me, are one, the story that you shared about your friends from church that had passed away. I believe you were about like 26 years old, and you did your best to try to restore them, and when you thought you had worked all night and they told you that they look like monsters. I can't imagine, one, hearing that at age 26, and two, hearing that after all night working, trying to do your best to restore them. That's just, it's rough, and it's something that you never want to hear from a family. So, and then the second thing was, I don't remember if it's that same episode, but I think Brian or Ryan asked you, what do you do in the case where you took the time to restore somebody and you balmed them and they still want a closed casket, and you told them that that was essentially pride. That's your pride, that's your ego. And I thought that's amazing, because it's true. Like, our first concern is the family and what they want. So diving in, episode 174 was, as I said, Anna Marie Foster, and she's a funeral director and embalmer, and her path began at age 20, but she didn't actually become licensed until age 40. So she was at her father's funeral. She's 20 years old, and this was, the family's first look. And the first thing she asked was if she was in the right room. She said that she could not recognize her father and that it looked like Dracula. And she asked for four things. She asked for a towel, she asked for a cup of water, she asked for a comb, and she asked for some hairspray. And she, wiped off all the makeup. She said he was coated in makeup. It covered his veiny, cheeks, which he was known for. And we just actually recently discussed that in facial markings, and the importance of creating the natural form and making sure that the person looks like the decedent and how they looked in life, and not what we necessarily think is aesthetically pleasing. And the sad part is, aside from her father passing away, that even though she knows that she was satisfied with how he looked after she, corrected, everything, the only image that she remembers is that first image of her father not looking like himself. And I thought that was just awful, because I definitely relate to that. I had an ex-boyfriend that passed away at 28, and this was in 2019. And I hadn't seen him in about 6 years. And I walked into the room, and he was just so unrecognizable. He was 6 shades too dark. His nails were just coated in makeup. They were on his nails. It was stained on his clothing. And for somebody who had OCD in his life, that would have driven him nuts. He never had anything out of place. So I definitely related to that. And then, so she said that 20 years go by and her grandmother passed away, and she said she lost quite a few people in her lifetime, and each time she did not go up to the casket. Even for her brother's service, she could not bring herself to look at him in the casket because she was so afraid that she wasn't going to recognize the person that she saw. So when her grandmother passed away, very close person to her, she requested that she do the grandmother's hair. And because she had been working in a nursing home, she had developed a close relationship to the local funeral director, and he agreed. So after, she did her hair, he offered to pay for mortuary school, send her to school so that, she can to do into this business. And as she said, pretty much everything just like lined up after that. She said that it was like a puzzle putting together that she'd been putting together her whole life. And while she was in school, she had a 4-year-old child, she was working 2 jobs, and she was going to school full time. And I relate to this so much because so I've been working as a bartender for 10 years. I still do that now. As you can see, I work full time in a funeral home, full time at school, and I have a 2-year-old son. So, I mean, it's not easy, but same thing happened to me where everything kind of just lined up. The pandemic shut down all the bars, so I had to find a new job, and I dove into working with Aldi. Like, I think I got the job within 2 days of all the restaurants shutting down. And at this, so I mean, I've been there for a couple months. I was offered a fast track to become a store manager, and that just didn't really seem like a good fit for me. And it made me question of like what I should be doing at that moment, because I had the opportunity to find something new. I had finally been forced to face my biggest fear, and that's finding a job in a different industry. I gotten so used to making money every day, having a schedule that I can, make myself, and just spending time at home. But it wasn't really something that I also felt good about at the end of the day. I mean, here and there you meet people that you'll never forget, and those relationships are important to me. But then you also have like the 2 a.m. nights where you have some drunk dude shouting in your face for like 15 minutes. Everything fell into place. So moving on, I was listening to her experiences, and it just was a great fit. She said that it's in such a small funeral home that she worked, the cases for like weeks straight, she was getting restorative cases, and like she made an ear out of essentially cotton and super glue, which I thought was amazing. She also does go and present the different places, and I know Brian and Ryan brought up the Estorino nerves, because I mean, it's hard presenting. I'm struggling with a 10-minute video. I can't imagine doing a whole hour presentation. So of course, her being female, they always ask the question what it's like to be a female in the funeral service, and I enjoyed her response because she said that she has not had a single problem from any of the male directors, and it's actually the females that she has issues with occasionally, because they're kind of catty and they're cliquey, and it reminds her of high school. I honestly haven't really had any issues myself either. I joke that it's kind of like a Mad Men environment, and they still have like this 1950s outlook, but I mean, unless somebody's really out of pocket, like I don't take offense. Like, these people have been doing it for beyond, I mean, as long as I've honestly been alive, and there's so much to learn from them. And I think if you come in, as she said, if you go in humble, you have a lot, you can learn a lot from these people. And I definitely agree when they were saying that ego definitely destroys productivity. If you think that you know it all, then this is not the job for you. There's a reason why we have continued education. The industry is constantly changing. There's always something to learn, and no case is ever the same. So let's see, what else do I have here? And then I don't even know how I can almost forget this. So one of the reasons why I selected her episode is because, one, I mean, I thought it was suiting. I mean, she loves restorative art. That is what she's passionate about. She's passionate about embalming. She does trade embalmings now, but it was a couple weeks after she had gotten her own funeral home, and there was a fire, and 4 children died in this fire. And of course, the question that we constantly are reminded of in this class is, can we see them? The mothers, they were young mothers. They had been down on their times. They had gone out, and they came back to find out that their 3 children and then another child who was there staying the night had passed away. And what she said is that you don't ever promise and don't ever say absolutely you can see them. Tell them that you will do everything you can to make that happen. And so she spoke with the medical examiner's office, and she spoke with the people who were on site, and everybody absolutely was saying no, absolutely not. So she went to the Emmys herself, the visitation was supposed to be later that day, and she viewed them. I mean, on top of being complete char, they were also autopsied, full autopsied. So she came up with the idea to essentially do a mummy wrap. So she used plastics, she used cotton, she used wood roll. She used autopsy gel like underneath the wood roll. She wrapped them up, she put plastic over. And she had gotten, there's like a local place in the community, and they help people with cancer and people down on the luck. And she, reached out to them and asked them if they can bring her clothing that'll fit ages between 3 and 8. And she needed hats, mittens, stockings. So she put the stocking over the plastics, and essentially she said they basically look like the mannequins, like the old school mannequins from Old Navy. And it was just, you can't, I mean, it's not, the family couldn't see them, but at least they had something tangible to touch. And these mothers, I mean, she said to this day that she'll run into them in history, and they constantly thank her. And the last note that I'll share about this review is that she says that she still bleeds with this family. She says all the people that come through, she bleeds with them. She loses them, and she stated that when she passes away, that she hopes that those babies are waiting for her in heaven, and that she gets to meet them, and that she's reunited with her family. Regardless of whether or not you're religious, I honestly believe that if you don't feel anything, for these families, and can't empathize, and again, like, you're too desensitized and shouldn't be in this industry either. I'm not saying you have to be a crying mess, but at the end of the day, you have to remember that these were people that were loved, and essentially you're doing everything you can for the family to either get that last look and to get that closure. I think that's everything I had. So that was episode 174 with Anna Marie Foster. I'm probably gonna revisit now that they're on, I think they're on their way to 400 episodes, so I'm about 150 episodes behind. But thank you for the opportunity to do this assignment. It was nice looking back, and I look forward to next week's lesson.